All right. We'll go ahead and get started. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Tiny Webinars. Today, we're covering progress plans, the feature in TINYpulse that track and calculate your survey responses and let you know how you're doing against your goals. We'll jump into that in just a second. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn for invites to events just like this, leadership live sessions with Dr. Boyles, where we break down and mash up all of the leadership and HR topics that are top of mind for you. Email me, Dear Andrew at tinypulse.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this show, as well as what you want to see. We get tons of inspiration from viewers like you. I read every single one. And of course, Dr. Voiles, we get all kinds of questions, and I would love to answer those on stream. Be sure also at the end of today's session, we'll leave a couple minutes before you got to jump to your next meeting to answer that feedback survey. Let us know how we did today, so how we can improve for next time, as well as that's an opportunity to drop ideas and what's top of mind for you for future Tiny webinars. I'm joined today by Samuel Duggan, Senior Customer Success Associate for TINYpulse, and Dr. Laura Voiles, Lead People Scientist for TINYpulse as well. Sam, I'm going to have you take it away. What are you going to show us today?
Cool. Thanks very much, Andrew. So yeah, we're going to be focusing mainly or almost entirely on progress plans today. We're very, very excited about this. It's a really nice continuation of what we went over last week, but also TINYpulse's new push towards better data, better automation, just better overall understanding of your guys' organization and culture. Before we dive too deep into that, we are going to recap last week for those of you who missed it. Really, really quickly, just go over what that new engagement survey is and key driver analysis as well. We'll then jump into how we came up with the progress plans, give you guys a quick explanation of how they work, how they're meant to be built, before we then jump into the demo. And of course, as Andrew mentioned, get to some of your questions as well. There'll be points as well throughout the webinar where we'll stop and answer any questions that have come up. But of course, anything that is on your mind, or as Andrew says, any questions at all, please drop them in the chat or in the Q&A function, and we'll get to them. Cool. So before we jump in, just to give you guys an update as well. So progress plans actually went live 19th, so that's Monday of last week. Again, we're very, very excited about this functionality. And one few questions that come up is, what changes has this made? And the main overall change that has happened is your happiness survey, which you may have been used to seeing as a pulse question in the pulse queue, is actually been upgraded into a happiness progress plan. For a few accounts, it did cause a bit of a hiccup where happiness survey did go out unintentionally on Wednesday 21st, but as soon as we were made aware of the issue, we did fix it. But of course, we actually have Anna in the chat as well as our support team online as well. So if you have any further questions tonight, feel free to reach out to them. If you are curious about where your happiness trend now lives, it actually is going to live under those progress plan tabs in the happiness trend progress plan. You can view that, of course, at any time. So again, any questions around that, please feel free to drop it in the chat. We have Anna standing by to answer those, as well as you can feel free to reach out to the support team. So let's recap last week really, really quickly. So we're going to start off with the new engagement survey, and who better to give you an explanation of what that is than other than Dr. Boyles.
Yeah, so just to give you a recap of the new engagement survey, which we talked about last week, this new engagement survey is specifically focused on employee engagement and aspects that drive employee engagement. We researched and tested it with 3 of our expert brains. We had 3 IO psychologists on it, so that's industrial organizational psychology, where we specialize in research, statistics, and also solving challenges in the workplace. It's a scientific study that we validated, and it's what we call KDA friendly, which is key driver analysis friendly. And it's really the perfect size. It's short enough that it doesn't cause survey fatigue in your employees, but it's long enough that it gives you information about both your employee engagement and the drivers of that engagement. And now we've set it as a default option because it is our leading survey. And this survey, just to give you a little bit more background in case you missed last week, it has an engagement index, which has 5 outcome questions. These are centering around employee happiness, their engagement, and their intention to stay with your organization. We also look at 15 different key drivers that can influence those outcome questions that are so important for your organization. And here we've showed a model of what it could look like in your 12-month cycle with the engagement survey. And so you would start off by administering this survey. You diagnose those survey results, and with our help with key driver analysis, that's all automated. And then you can take action, so implement different initiatives, do some follow-up surveys, change some policies, and then you measure the effect of that before you do the other engagement survey the next year or annually. So this helps you with change management in your organization. And if you want to learn more about the engagement survey, feel free to reach out to a customer success person. In fact, Anna's happens to be on the chat as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Boyles. Could
Yeah.
you mind going into KDA a little bit more as well?
Yes, absolutely. So I mentioned KDA just briefly. KDA stands for Key Driver Analysis, and this is essentially an algorithm that combines looking at the correlation and the room for improvement in order to determine which key drivers are the most impactful for your organization. And so this really helps you target things that are going to be meaningful, and you can kind of focus more on what you're going to get the most bang for your buck with. With KDA, like I said, we're combining correlation and that kind of room for improvement. And it helps you make these decisions and recommendations confidently and without needing, a data scientist and without needing to wait months. It's actually all automated. It shows up in your TINYpulse platform as soon as you have enough responses. So there's no need for you to do anything. As soon as you just open up your admin account, you'll actually see the results there. And it's real-time analysis. So actually, as you get more responses in, you'll see that maybe your results will change slightly as you get more employee opinions factored in. So key drivers, really exciting, and it kind of allows you to make these decisions more quickly. I see a question from Meredith about the recommended cadence. I would say that in most cases for the recommended cadence with the engagement survey, you would want to do it annually. There might be a case here or there where maybe you might do it a couple of times a year. I wouldn't recommend any more than that because it is a bit of a longer survey. For example, you might want to do it a couple of times a year if your organization is going through a lot of change and you want to kind of keep an eye on everything in terms of those key drivers and your employee engagement. But if everything's kind of holding steady, I would say annually, and then you support that with additional surveys, which Sam is going to talk about in our progress plan. No problem. And if you have follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them, Meredith.
Yeah, of course. Like, I see there's another question there, also from Christina Madrid, just about the advantages of the change to the happiness survey. And just to give you an understanding about that big change, is with these progress plans, you get to see trends over time, and you also get to break that down by attributes, so like department, manager, location, tenure, stuff like that. So you get a bit more data, a bit more insight into that trend overall. But don't worry, we haven't deleted your previous happiness trend. We've just converted it over to this progress plan. So all the former data points are going to be there with a bit more insight and a bit more understanding too. And for Anna's email address, I believe she's going to be reaching out to Christina shortly. Awesome.
Thanks, Sam. I missed that other question, so I'm glad you saw it.
It's all good. No worries. That's why there's two of us, right? We tag team.
Yeah.
So how do progress plans fit into what we're going to learn this and what we learned last week, right? So to your point about the engagement survey and to Dr. Boyles' point about KDA and how key driver analysis is so helpful for us, is we're able to now accurately quantify, only your engagement with your culture, but we're able to have better insight and data and understanding of what's affecting that, right? That's what the key driver analysis is doing. It's not only showing us what that engagement index score is, it's showing what's having the highest impact on. And this week, what we're going to introduce with progress plans is you'll be able to monitor and also oversee and facilitate that change, right? So obviously with the engagement survey, KDA, we're identifying areas of growth. With the progress plan, we're able to monitor those areas and see if the improvements we're making in our culture, in our organization, are having marked improvements by looking and monitoring with these surveys. Cool. So let's jump into progress plans themselves. So first of all, a little bit of history of how we came to this point. Of course, we talked to you guys first and foremost, how we get all our best ideas. And we asked you two big pointed questions. First of all, what is your primary goal with surveying? And how are you determining if that's successful or not? And what we noticed just from conversations with you all is that you're either not really sure what you're looking to find out, it's that you don't know what you don't know aspect of it, or you're just looking to improve your employees' engagement in your culture and in your organization. Both stuff is a little bit hard to quantify, and it both kind of points to the fact that we're not really sure what we're looking for, other than we want to have an engaged audience. And how is that determined if you're successful or not? Well, a lot of it's mostly anecdotal. You might have had a actionable piece of feedback, something you can put into effect that could affect your happiness score, affect your overall employee engagement. Or a big one that we hear a lot, and if you've ever had a call with me, we discuss in detail, is response rates as well. And I do see a great benefit in response rates. The more data you have, the better feedback and items of action to go on. But what we notice is that the takeaway we got from this is that it's very hard to know if you're making progress on that initiative and on your engaged audience strategy. And that we at TINYpulse just need to give you better tools, first of all, to achieve that, but secondly, to understand how engaged your employees are and better ways for you to measure improvements to that engagement as well. And that's where progress plans are kind of birthed into. So to give you kind of an understanding about what progress plans consist of, essentially, they are just a way for you to set a particular focus area, right? Create a survey that is set on a particular cadence. You can monitor and see if any changes, especially positive changes to the engagement score or to that focused area, are being achieved by actions you're taking in your organization and your culture. So in this example, let's say we ran an engagement survey, and through the key driver analysis, the key driver or the key focus area or opportunity for us was recognition. It's something we need to prioritize. It's something we need to improve upon. I can take that information and I can go ahead and create a progress plan built around recognition. Very simply, I'll just give it a title of recognition, add a description, let our employees know, first of all, why I'm asking this survey, but also how I came to ask this survey. I can mention, of course, the engagement survey we ran earlier in the year and how recognition was shown as something we need to prioritize. I can then set a timeline, and this is very interesting too, because not only can you set the duration, so 6 months, a year, but you can also set the cadence for the survey so that can fit what your org is first of all used to, but also what you as admins feel comfortable. I know from a lot of you there's a concern about survey fatigue. So we want to give you the tools and make sure not only that you can set the duration and the cadence that you think is going to be most successful for your organization and most comfortable for your users to actually respond to. Afterwards, we would just choose the type and content of the survey. For those of you familiar with TINYpulse, that's of course the anonymous, confidential, or visible. You're not tied to one. You can really run any of them. Of course, there's some added benefits of, let's say, running a confidential over an anonymous survey. You as a super admin could export that survey and get a bit more demographic information, for example. And then, of course, you would also choose the contents of that survey. And in this regard, it would be the recognition survey that we have within the question. Finally, you set it for the audience. We do recommend, especially while you guys are still getting used to progress plans, to set it to the entire audience. First of all, a larger audience, better statistical data. Secondly, it's good, especially whenever rolling out a new tool, to introduce everyone to it and see how people react to it before you start delving a little bit deeper into individual departments or segments in the organization.
Thank you for that example. That really illustrates the process with these progress plans. Let's take a moment now and look at the poll results. So we asked, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your ability to measure success and return on investment on your HR programs? And we found that on average, everyone's kind of, 42% are in the middle, kind of saying like, we have it, but not quite. 26% say they have no measurement to speak of. So Any measurement above that is definitely an improvement. Another 26% have just a step above, and 5% have it at, kind of a high level, but not quite down to a science. And no one said they have it down to a science yet. So it sounds like there's a lot of room for improvement in how we measure the success and how we look at that return on investment.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we're so excited about the progress plans, right? The
Mhm.
point that no one had it down to the science. Well, with the engagement survey with KDA, we're doing some of that scientific heavy lifting for you and allowing you to not only automate, but know what to focus on as well to make it a little bit easier for you guys.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's try and combine everything we've learned then. So not only the engagement survey and key drivers and the key driver analysis, but now progress plans as well. And luckily for us, it's actually quite simple because not only do we have the engagement survey, we also we're going to introduce in the next few weeks, the engagement progress plan. This speaks a little bit to what Dr. Bowles mentioned earlier to a question about how long should the cadence be for something like this. Well, we're going to have a progress plan built around the engagement survey, where the engagement survey will be asked annually with quarterly monitoring surveys based on those 5 index questions. Again, for those of you who missed last week, as Dr. Bowles explained, the first 5 questions of the survey are what we call engagement questions that are averaged to give you an engagement index number, which is essentially saying how engaged your audience is in the culture, in the company, in the organization. And you'll be able to have those quarterly monitoring surveys so you can see if the changes you're making within your culture, within your organization, are having a positive impact on that index score. And of course, how do you figure out what we need to change? That is, of course, through KDA. So not only can you have that engagement progress plan in place, you can notice in the KDA, the key driver analysis, specific key drivers and areas of improvement. And you can take that information, take those key drivers, and create additional progress plans built around them. In the example I gave before, we said recognition was a key driver we needed to improve. So we built a progress plan built around recognition. If you had something that said effective management, happiness, communication, you can create progress plans around that. Again, we want to make sure we give you all the information and as much insight in your organization as possible, and then give you the tools to do something with that. And there really is no limit on how many progress plans you can run. And the great thing with that too is when you're setting these progress plans up, you do have an understanding of when those surveys are going to go out. So if survey fatigue is something you're worried about, don't worry, we make it very clear where those surveys go out and you're able to set a cadence and a duration to ensure there is no overlap. Cool. But the thing I think we're most excited about is what they ultimately provide, which is more intentional reporting. There's been a big drive here at TINYpulse, especially in the last few years, to give you guys more data, more insights, and better reporting. And this is a bit of the natural progression of that, right? To the point someone asked earlier about the happiness trend and what benefit this brings. Well, now by moving it to a progress plan and having you guys have access now to create your own individual progress plans or ones we are recommending, you get better insight not only by being able to break it down through attributes, but over time and through a trend graph as well. It's a little bit more deeper, it's a little bit better insight. And of course, we think it's going to be a great tool for you all to better automate your surveys, but also automate your engagement surveys as well.
Absolutely. So when you're automating those surveys, it enables you to sit down with your decision makers and be strategic about what types of surveys you want to administer. It makes it just easier to make a whole plan around an aspect that you want to improve. Now, Sam, I saw a Q&A in here asking about what is the happiness trend. So
Yes.
can you explain this?
Absolutely. So the happiness trend is a trend or a graph based on what we call the happiness question, which is TINYpulse's premier question we used to run for all our new accounts back in the day. It's still live, but essentially we're asking, how happy are you at work? And we get a numerical score on that. And for a very long time, it was one of our only ways to tell how engaged an audience was, is this happiness question, this one question that goes out, I would say normally about once a quarter. We've updated that, but we've kept it as well. So if happiness is something you're used to, that trend still exists. It's just been migrated to a progress plan. But with the new engagement survey and the monitoring surveys, we think we give you a lot more tools around checking how engaged your audience is and better understanding of what's affecting their engagement as well. And I see here, there's another question too about whether progress plans are included or if they're a buy option. And I'm very happy to announce that anyone, and in fact, all of you currently have access to progress plans. They went live on the 19th, and they currently sit in all of your accounts currently. If you go into TINYpulse and just make sure you navigate to the admin view, you'll notice on the left-hand side of your screen, there's now a new tab called Progress Plans. And when you click into it, you might see a happiness progress plan in there already. Or if not, of course, you can go ahead and create some of your own progress plans too. Now, this is very exciting for us because unlike KDA, which we introduced last week, which had a restriction on the amount of active users you have to have for it to be able to be used, there are no restrictions with KDA. So it's live in everyone's account right now. You can go literally at the end of this webinar and create as many as you would like. And again, as they're built on a cadence function where you get to set the cadence and the duration, you get to see when building those progress plans, when are your other surveys going out? For example, if you're on a bi-weekly survey schedule, you're able to see exactly when those other surveys are meant to go live and make sure that you're putting these cadences in around that as well. And of course, when we go into the demo, I'll give you guys a better visual understanding of that too. One other thing you'll see in there as well, if you click into your progress plans right now, is TINYpulse recommended. And this is a feature coming soon, which is going to be pre-made plans that we curate, that we build, that target particular topics that you may wish to improve upon. For example, you run an engagement survey, you now know what you need to prioritize to improve your engagement in your culture and your organization. Well, in the future, or coming very, very soon, there'll be a TINYpulse recommended progress plan built around different functions and different things you can learn from the engagement survey and from KDA. I think we got those questions done. Awesome. So Dr. Boas, would you give us some tips on using progress plans?
Yeah, so there might be some questions as you're starting to use progress plans. For example, you might wonder, what if my organization doesn't have KDA, which is key driver analysis? How do I decide what to measure? And this would be kind of the same process that you would use anytime you're looking at survey results and deciding what initiatives to target. So for example, if you have an active organizational initiative going on, so let's say, for example, you're doing some managerial training and you want to check in on manager effectiveness. That would be one initiative that you might want to target in your progress plan, just to see if your training has been effective in changing those managerial effectiveness scores. You might also want to consider, like, if your organization is going through a merger or some other large change, that would be a good time to target like communication. You also want to listen to your employees from one-on-ones, town halls, and qualitative data. So that's like the open-ended text where they might tell you like what their compliments are, but what their gripes are. Those are areas you could also target. You could also look at the theoretical connection with a problem area. So for example, if you are struggling with retention and you know just from the research that, for example, manager effectiveness is a big predictor of whether people decide to stay or leave your organization, that can be an area that you decide to target. Another area could be based on business need. So if you find that your employees are lagging in their engagement, that's where you can kind of look and see, okay, maybe we can target growth and development in order to get them more engaged. And then finally, and this is a very simple one, just looking at the survey scores. If you find that there are a few areas where your employees are rating things very low, so if they're rating that they don't feel very recognized in your organization, that would be an area to target. The next big question, and I found that I get this one a lot, is how often should I repeat the survey? So for example, when you're doing progress plans and you're doing a targeted survey, for example, if you're looking at employee recognition or employee satisfaction with benefits and pay, it really depends. So it depends on the survey size. If it's a short survey, you can ask that survey more frequently, but if it's a longer one, you don't want to ask it as frequently because you might risk that employee kind of survey exhaustion where they just don't want to respond to any more questions. You might want to ask more frequently though if it's a very critical issue. So if your organization is really struggling with, for example, communication or with attrition, that's where you might want to ask surveys a little bit more frequently so that you can track your progress on it as it's an issue that's currently affecting everyone. Another one is change in progress. So like I gave the example earlier, if you're doing a training, you're going to want to ask a survey around that type of training to make sure that it's effective. Another one is initiative evaluation. So let's say that you've just implemented a new performance management system. You may want to evaluate the effectiveness of that. So you could look at your employee growth and development to see, is this performance management system a positive change for your employees in terms of how they feel about their ability to grow in your organization. And then one final but very big consideration, I actually left this one for last for this reason, is your ability to respond. So you definitely don't want to ask questions and surveys more frequently than what you can handle in terms of your response in like sharing back the results with employees as well as developing initiatives. Because if you have a whole backlog of survey responses and you haven't done anything about it, this can make employees feel disempowered and it can make them less likely to respond. So it plummets your response rates. So you want to put it at a cadence that is manageable given your own workload and what's going on in your organization. So those are just a couple of quick tips, but if you have other questions about tips and progress plans, especially while Sam shows the demo, drop your questions in the chat and we'll answer them live.
Absolutely. And Dr. Bowles, it's totally one of the biggest things I always talk about with customers too, right? Is one of the biggest indicators for us and whether or not response rates will drop is if there is a bunch of feedback that has kind of gone unanswered. That's one of the biggest discouraging things I think for users to see as well. But there has actually a question came through Dr. Bowles as well about, does every account have access to KDA? And I know that there is a minimum requirement of 75 active users. And would you mind maybe explaining why that exists?
Sure. Yeah, it looks like Megan asked this question about KDA access. Not every account will have this access. Many will, though. And the reason is that we need enough responses to have statistical significance. So if you don't have enough responses, it's difficult statistically to determine what the relationships are between the key drivers and the outcomes. And that's just the nature of statistics, unfortunately. If I could, I'd want KDA to be available to everyone. So if you, Megan, have that availability, awesome, go for it and try out KDA because I think it's really great. If your organization is on the line and let's say you don't have quite 75 active employees, you can talk to your customer success manager and see if possibly you can have it opened or if there are other options in terms of that data analysis so that you can get the most out of your survey results. It looks like we have one more. How much information from survey results should be shared with employees? Jules, this is a tough question. Sorry, Sam, did you want to jump into?
You go ahead first because I have some more anecdotal data, I believe.
Okay. Well, my big answer is that it depends. I think that if you are starting an initiative, if you're changing things based on those survey responses, I think that's a great time to share. As long as it's not too, as long as it's not going to be like too upsetting to employees, or you can kind of share enough to let them know the reason why. So for example, let's say you ran your survey and you found that manager effectiveness was rated low. My suggestion, just kind of assuming this is normal circumstances, everything else is normal, my suggestion would be first talk to the managers about it. Let them know that this is coming. Let them know like, hey, we found that these scores are a little bit low, so we're going to start some initiatives, and we're also going to share this back to employees. Then you share it back to employees along with a plan that you've kind of worked together with the managers on how to improve that. And so that way you've kind of gotten the buy-in from your managers, but you also have shared back the results, and you've used that as the rationale for both employees and managers for why you're changing things. So I would definitely say my big answer is it depends. It can be delicate though, and I'll let Sam jump in because it sounds like he has some examples from working with customers on this exact issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Transparency is something that I do think is a big help, not only about response rate, but getting actionable feedback as well. And to Dr. Vo's points, you want to be delicate, of course, when you are sharing your data, but we do give you a few different opportunities to do so. We talk a lot about, especially the customer success side of things, when we're meeting with our customers and we're trying to assist them, we talk a lot about the feedback loop and making sure that when a user is leaving a response, they're at least feeling like the feedback loop is being completed, either through a private message or by a discussion or sharing out of the data, just so they know they've been heard and they've been seen, which is very powerful for a lot of employees. So I normally say when you're thinking about what should be shared, first of all, I would say reach out to your CS individual. They can walk through all the different sharing functions we do have. But I always say I lean on the side of transparency, because not only does it give you a good opportunity to talk to the group on different themes coming up in your responses, but if there is an issue, let's say about response rates, or maybe the feedback you're getting is good but not necessarily actionable, you can have that discussion in person, in a group setting, or in any function that works best for you in sharing that data back, where you can discuss that with the group, discuss that with your audience, and let them know a little bit more about what you're looking for and what you need from them to cause good positive change and increase their engagement and make them happier employees overall.
Yeah, that's a great answer. It kind of gives both points in terms of like that transparency, but it's certainly a balance. I see we have one more question that we should get to before we move on, and it's from Meredith. And oh, and it looks like Anna also dropped in some information about sharing back data with employees. So feel free to check out that link that she provided. Thank you so much, Anna. Meredith asked a quick question, and she said, you know, there's so many good surveys available, and Meredith is wondering if they should reduce their pulse cadence, or which is currently every other week. And the way that I would answer this is certainly that it depends. Meredith, if you're doing it every other week and you feel that you're still having good response rates, you're addressing critical issues in your organization, and you're able to respond with that current cadence in place, I see no problems. But if you find that one of those things is kind of affected in a negative way, so for example, if your response rates have dropped off, or if you're not able to respond as quickly as you need to, or if you haven't been as strategic as you need to be because the surveys are coming so quickly, then I would say dial it back. But if you're doing this current cadence and it's working, I would say leave as is. Sam, if you have anything else you'd like to add on, feel free, or we can go ahead and go on. Oh, I nailed it.
Perfect
Okay.
answer. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Oh, wait, Meredith has one more question.
Go ahead.
Can we change the cadence ourselves? And yes, actually, Sam is going to show you that in the demo in a few minutes.
Absolutely. And if you are mentioning just your pulse cadence, that can be changed at any time by going to settings and then the account or company page. So let's jump. Oh, actually, looks like we're about to jump into FAQs and then the demo, but it seems that someone had a really quick question about they have zero specific HR success. Andrew mentions that they have zero specific HR success measures as our department was just created this year. Are there any key drivers we could implement to quickly and reliably get started tomorrow? And to answer that, and I think Dr. Voss will agree with me here, you should probably ask an engagement survey to figure out what
that was my answer as well. Is like, you need that big engagement survey first to diagnose and determine which areas are most important. Now, if you really, for whatever reason, feel like you have to skip the engagement survey, which my first recommendation would be absolutely get the engagement survey. If for some reason that doesn't work, I would say focus on something that your organization is already currently working on. But again, engagement survey, I think, is the first stop for 95% of people.
Absolutely. So let's jump into some FAQs. Some of these might be they're a little bit of recapping of what we just went over, but first one is, where did my happiness trend go? And of course, as I mentioned, it is now a progress plan, and you'll find it under the progress plan tab in the admin view of TINYpulse. Again, all the data you previously collected will still be there to be able to understand trends and break it down by attributes. So we're very excited about this change. Another one is, how is this different from flexible surveys? Flexible surveys was another tool we rolled out in the last year or so, giving you the opportunity to ask surveys at any time to any audience and at any length of survey too. And they're very similar. In a lot of ways, I think we've made sure that setting a progress plan is as easy as setting a flexible survey. But the big difference between them is you get better reporting, better tools at automating a progress plan, and you get to understand trends, and again, break that down by attributes like department, tenure, location, manager, and so on and so forth. Can you reactivate a completed survey? Yes. At any time, you can go in and see a completed progress plan and reactivate them. For example, some of you who maybe had that happiness survey go live Wednesday, part of our fix was completing that as a progress plan. And if you wanted to go in and reactivate that and set it at a cadence and duration that best suits you, you can at any time, of course, go into your surveys, go into your progress plans, and then go to the completed plans and reactivate them and set the cadence and duration you're happy with. Can I change the day a survey goes out? Yes, the great thing about progress plans is that any active progress plan can be edited to change the date of the next survey. Let's say you have a progress plan in place, but then a very, very important all hands meeting is thrown on the calendar and you want to send a follow-up survey after that meeting. You need to change the date of a progress plan survey going out. You can simply go into progress plan, go to edit, and change the date of the next survey. And then finally, how will this affect the surveys I have already planned? No. The great thing is that, as I mentioned before, when you are creating your progress plans, you get to see when those other surveys are scheduled. And first of all, make sure the cadence is built so that it doesn't affect any other survey going live, but also set to the duration that best suits you as well. So you really do, again, want to give you all the tools and ensure that you can use them to the best of your abilities without affecting anything you're currently doing in TINYpulse with those other surveys you might have running.
Thanks for answering those questions, Sam. While Sam queues up the demo, let's open it up in case you have any questions, or if there are any kind of survey issues that you're curious about, or if you'd like to know more about survey topics or that cadence. Feel free to drop them in the Q&A or the chat. We'll give you the answers right away, and then we'll also check out a demo, which we have about 15 minutes for.
Timing. Yes. I will just continue on, but I'll stop if I see any questions come through. But now I've logged in to my TINYpulse instance, and I'm now sitting in admin view. Of course, for those of you familiar with TINYpulse, this is where you're going to do the vast majority of your work as an admin. Of course, look at your dashboard, see what's currently going on, and also schedule surveys. So if I was curious and I'm thinking I want to get an engagement or a progress plan up and running, what should it be about? The first thing I'm probably going to do is I'm going to go to my surveys. I'm going to go to engage. I'm going to go to responses. I have just recently ran an engagement survey. So when I go to my responses, I'll be able to go in and view that engagement survey and see different key drivers or opportunity areas for me to prioritize and improve upon. I simply go into the engagement survey. Of course, here is my key driver analysis. View the analysis data. And here's my recommended priorities to improve the engagement index And of course, if I scroll a little bit lower, I get all the key drivers, and I can simply mouse over them to see which ones I need to prioritize, celebrate, review, and maintain.
So Sam,
yeah.
Oh yeah, as an example, if you were an admin on an account, what would be your process for selecting the key drivers or the areas that you want to target in your progress plans?
Absolutely. So what I would first do, I'd look at this prioritize tab, which is also, you'll notice, going to be up here as well. And I would see which ones have the highest impact on my engagement score and which ones are marked as needed to prioritize. These would be the first ones I'd focus on, and this would be the ones I would build my first progress plans around. You'll notice here is that all of these are built around effective management, clear goals and expectations, supporting boss coaching, and recognition. So this is something I would build a progress plan around, is around this effective management, and maybe also building one around recognition as well, as that is one specifically called out to within this prioritize tab.
And just to kind of recap quickly how those prioritized items are identified, it's based on the correlation between that key driver or that question and those outcomes measuring engagement. And then we're also looking at items where your employees have scored the question lower. And so they're indicating that they're having less recognition and less of that manager effectiveness. And so that's why those are areas to target.
Absolutely. So now that I understand what I should build a progress plan around, it's actually very simple for me. I simply go to progress plan. You'll notice almost like a cooking show. I made this earlier and we'll come back to it. But I can go ahead and create a plan right here. This is where you would either create a plan from scratch or coming soon have a TINYpulse recommended plan to work on. I'm going to start from scratch, of course, and I'm going to name this plan recognition. I'm going to go ahead and give it a description as well. Why am I running this plan? How did I get the idea or information to run this plan? Of course, from the engagement survey from a key driver. And in basically just ensure that the employees know what's being asked of them, why I'm asking it. And also, just because I can, this is a nice little fun feature, I can go ahead and add in a little emoji so I can mark this plan as mine and make sure we're keeping it fun at the same time. As we keep on going, this is where we get to set a timeline. So first of all, I would choose the send and start date and end date of the first survey. So not the full plan, just the first survey. And when I do so, this is what we were talking about before, I can see when other surveys are scheduled. So for example, there's one going on the 25th, one just went out on the 28th. So because those surveys are going out on those dates, I'm going to try avoid having a survey live on the same date. So I'm going to have this go out on the 2nd. I'm going to have it stay open for 2 weeks. Then choose the start and end time. And I'm going to go ahead and pick the nice time of noon. And in here on this timeline, you'll see the first survey has populated. Now we get into the repeat section. So you can set this to the cadence that works best for you, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually. And I'm going to do monthly in this regard. And now I'm going to set how often or how long the duration is going to be. It can be indefinite, like a happiness progress plan will likely be indefinite because it's something you're always measuring. But because this is something that we're building based on an annual survey, I'm only going to have it go out 12 times because after it's been done 12 times, I'll have a new engagement survey. My KDAs may have upgraded or updated, and I may want to focus on a different area of opportunity other than recognition. Hitting next, I then choose the survey type. Again, it can be anonymous, confidential, or visible, and there's an explanation of what each of those means. And of course, your employees are also going to know what type of survey they're answering, so there'll never be any confusion on whether they're answering an anonymous, confidential, or visible survey. Afterwards, very similar to a flexible survey, I can either start with one of our TINYpulse templates or create a template from scratch. I'm going to go ahead and start with a template for the reason that I know there is a recognition survey already built. So since I'm looking to measure and measure this recognition piece as I make changes within my organization, I'm going to make sure that I'm just going to ask the recognition survey, which is pre-built for me. Again, these surveys are configurable. You can delete questions if need be, move them around, add additional questions if any come to mind. This is a great opportunity if you have maybe a custom question that would be very specific to your org, adding that in to the survey as well as you go. Of course, once you've made any changes, you can save this as your own template, making it easier to pull up in the future. After that, I set my audience. As I mentioned before, we do recommend setting it to the entire company, especially for your first one, or especially if your engagement survey was set to the entire company, because since we're going to be looking at the company for one, we should be looking at the company for others as well. Afterwards, we then get to personalize the email. What you'll notice is that we've already put a templated version in here for you, so you can leave it as is, edit or add to it if you feel like you need to, and of course, give more information to those employees if you so wish. Afterwards, they'll give me a details plan of what that survey is, who it's being sent to, when it was created, and the timeline, as well as all those surveys. If I want to check one more time, I can preview it, or of course, go back to any one of these tasks or steps to make changes. Otherwise, I hit save, and I now have an active recognition plan right here waiting to be reviewed and surveys to be sent out. So again, it's very simple to get a progress plan set up. We want to make it sure that the tools we're giving you are usable and understanding, and you're able to get them set up as much as you need, and of course have as many active as you need. But before we jump in and look at what an active progress plan looks like, along with the trends and attributes and so on, I just want to take a second and check, has any questions come through?
We're good on questions. I had a quick one though.
Yeah.
Sam, let's say you're running this recognition progress plan, and for whatever reason, let's say that you need to add a new progress plan later on, and you want to scale back. Right now you're doing it monthly. Let's say you want to do it quarterly. How do you go back and change that?
Great question. So these are configurable, so they can be edited at any time. You would simply click on the three gray dots and you can see the complete delete option. We're going to choose edit. And just like before, we'll be walked through the 7 steps. And we are then, of course, able to update the cadence so that we can still have it run yearly, but of course, move it to quarterly instead.
Right. Thanks for showing that.
No worries. Yeah, you just hit next, make sure you're happy with everything else. And of course, you'll see the update you've made here in the final screen. And you simply hit save. Awesome. Cool. Then I will jump into an active progress plan just to give you an idea what that looks like and the data and insights you can pull from it. So when you click in, you'll be given an overview of the plan. You'll be able to see what surveys have been answered, which one is yet next to come, as well as some indicators from it. So you'll be able to see the latest score, the first score, the change since your previous survey score, and of course, the overall improvement from when you first asked it until now. So it gives you a nice little, in a small package, understanding of how it's being done. If you want to see a bit more of a detailed view, you simply click progress over time and you get that trending graph. And what you'll notice is as I mouse over these individual data points, I have the option to go to that survey, view the responses, and again, private message, do something sharing back with them on that side. So I can make sure I can always be able to access these previous asked surveys. The questions within the survey will be broken out just below, and you'll see what those questions were, what category they fell into, your previous score, their latest score, and the individual trend for each of those questions. And I did mention one of the best things about progress plans is the ability to break this down by attribute. So for example, if I wanted to go and compare this by, let's say, tenure, I can click in and that graph will now be updated. So I don't just have the organizational average. I now have each tenure option within my company. So 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5, 5 or more, or less than 1. And if I wanted to mouse over those individual data points again, I'll actually be able to see the individual score by attribute on every single survey. This is a great way to see if maybe the changes you're making within your organization are having a more marked effect on one part of your tenure, for example, than another. And of course, tenure is not just the only option. We can, of course, do office location, management level, and so on.
What's nice about this is that you can see if there's a particular area where employees are struggling. So for example, you might find that things are great in, let me see, the Los Angeles office, but perhaps, yeah, the Vancouver office needs a little bit of help. So it helps you target your initiatives. Another thing to note while you're using these progress plans is the time of different events that may affect the employee responses. So for example, let's say that a upper level kind of senior executive decided to step down. You could look at the responses and see how that affects employees' responses to manager effectiveness or communication. So it kind of gives you a pulse on how employees are feeling before they all start running into your office and talking about issues that they're experiencing. So it helps you determine the effect of both the planned change and the unplanned change in your organization.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, why we're so excited about this, right? The big thing I've heard from a lot of you is you need better insight into what the organization is feeling, and you need better data on how to do so. And that's what progress plans, engagement survey, and KDA is meant to be. And I think with these trifecta of tools, we've really set you guys up for success and having really good understanding not only of how engaged your audience is, but what's affecting that engagement. And not only that, you now have the tools to automate measuring those specific areas so that you guys can focus on doing the hard work and making the changes in the organization. And then coming to TINYpulse, checking these automated progress plans and see if the changes you're making are having the effect you hope for.
Thank you so much, Sam, for that demo. It was really helpful to see it in progress.
I will say, if there's nothing else, we can jump back into the Q&A portion.
Yeah, let's open it up. We'll hang on for a few minutes if you have questions. Otherwise, if you decide that you need to jump to your next meeting, feel free, but you'll get a quick survey so that you can rate this presentation and let us know your thoughts.